A new news article about the Bureau of Prisons hit the news over the weekend, and it is BOP Director Marshall plots new direction for the Bureau of Prisons. All right, before we get into this, if you don't know already, my name is Santino Pino. Thanks for being here. Go ahead and hit the subscribe button for more, like if you feel ready to, and stick around to the end for some announcements. But let's go and do a react to this article and go over what it might mean. Um, Walt Pavlo says Walter here, but looks like he goes by Walt. Walt Pavlo is the writer of this article. He sat down with Director Marshall to discuss the new direction of the federal agency. There's been no shortage of material for anyone to write about regarding the Bureau of Prisons (BOP). Each day, the BOP faces challenges in incarcerating some of the most violent inmates in the United States. It can be a thankless job for the front lines of the 119 prisons in the BOP. In recent years, those jobs have become difficult to fill, adding to the pressures of those who have dedicated their lives to corrections. And the fact, I mean, I might already like this guy. I haven't read the rest of the article yet. But the fact that he put it that way and talked about the challenges and how it is a challenging career, which most news media people, most article writers, journalists don't. And the fact that he did, well, brownie point, man. I hope the article stays good. Let's continue. Management in BOP has been a concern for nearly 10 years. Turnover at the BOP's top director position has been an issue. William Marshall III, I do believe he likes going by Billy, though. Okay. I won't call him that. I'll say Director Marshall here. Is the seventh BOP director in 10 years. To give you an idea of the BOP leaderships prior, there had only been 8 directors between the agency's founding in 1930 until 2016, when President Trump selected Marshall as director of the Bureau of Prisons alongside with Deputy Director Josh Smith. The message was clear. The administration wanted a reset. After years of criticism, scandals, and declining public confidence, the BOP has new leadership with a mandate to rebuild credibility and restore operational discipline. And as someone that was part of the Bureau prior to 2016, so I left the Bureau in 2014, okay? As someone that was part of this, I guess I know until 2016 when they appointed Director Marshall, but there were problems with staffing before that. Okay, a lot of times when you have jobs that have hundreds or thousands of positions that need to be filled, I see so much leadership. I see entrepreneurs make the same mistake. So don't think this is a BOP mistake that I'm about to say. Okay, this is a just management mistake that I see happens a lot in many different industries. Okay, you go from focused on recruiting talented people to come fill positions, and then suddenly one day you wake up and you realize that all you're doing is managing your existing employees and not focused on bringing in new blood. Okay. There's not much you can do for someone after they're an employee. Okay. They're already there. They're getting their job. I mean, what did that guy in Mad Men said? That's what the pay is for. You know, I got paid. I worked for the Bureau of Prisons. I got paid decent money for the job that I did. Okay. Could it be better? Do I always want more money? Yeah, I do. But I would say compared to the rest of corrections, it was paying pretty well. And no, I don't think the Bureau it should be the top payer. I think it should be competitive. I really do. I think it should have different ones that are paying the most at a different time because of really where you need people, right? There's ways to do that correctly. Wage economics. But those problems regarding staffing, when I was in the Bureau, it was my last year in the Bureau, it was very heavily let's manage the people we have and just see who we get. And that's not a focus on recruiting talented people. That's not. Okay. And I really don't know. I don't know how big their academies are now. I don't even know if academies are the same. When I started, You did 2 or 3 weeks of classroom training. Then you became really a field trainee where you're shadowing or you're on what are called second annuals where you're just working all over the place. And then within a month or two, you're going over to FLETC, the Federal Law Enforcement Training Academy or Training Center. And then you do a 3 week, I think it was a 3 week academy. And then you came back and now you're allowed to hold firearms. Um, I don't know if it's still the same. There's always two different types of training. There was your IF, which became ICT, and then there was your academy or your Glencoe or whatever you wanted to call it. So, but I don't know what it's like right now, but I remember my funnest times in the Bureau, I can also correlate to there were constant IF classes, which newer officers will call that ICT. There was constantly 20 or 30 people just always in that classroom filling positions because people are always quitting, but they're not always hiring. People are always quitting, but they're not always hiring. Let me say this again, just so you can understand it, and I'm hoping somebody from the Bureau sees it. People are always quitting, so you always need to be hiring to fill those positions. You can't hope that somebody's going to stay there. I have watched people within months of a qualified retirement get a dream job and quit and lose out on most of their retirement because they got a dream job somewhere or something, right? You never know who's going to go, but they are going to go. There's always going to be a percentage. It's called recidivism. There's or turnover rate. Like there's a high turnover rate in many jobs. I think the Bureau was floating just under 20%, right? So it means like 1 out of 5 Bureau employees will quit this year. It used to be 1 out of 7. Before that, honestly, when I was there, it had nothing to do with this, but when I was there when I first started, it's 1 out of 9. But now it is 1 out of 5 people will quit their job this year. So that means you need to hire that many people. And to me, as a business owner, I get that. That seems simple. Like, okay, we have a turnover rate. We need to hire this many people to fill those positions, and we just have to do that proactively and not wait for them to quit. Makes sense to me. But for some reason, I don't think the Bureau's ever understood that. And maybe this is it. Maybe this is the time. Okay. So Walt was able to sit down with BOP Director Marshall and ask him about his first year in the position and the vision he has for the future. And Marshall, who came from the West Virginia Division of Corrections and Rehab, a much smaller agency than the BOP, had ideas to focus on returning better citizens back to the community who would not return to prison. Wow, that was a tough sentence to read. Sorry about that. When it comes down to it, first him getting the opportunity to sit down, but I think the biggest thing that stands out to many people here is the fact that BOP Director Marshall was appointed as an outsider. He came from a different agency, and that's hiring from the outside, right? That was hired from the outside and taking up the #1 leadership position. And I want to correct something here. I don't know what happened here. When Director Marshall took over 9 years after this, I think they were just associating President Trump's first term. But just a correction from this sentence earlier, Billy Marshall has only been a BOP director since April 21st, 2025. So we're only approaching the 1 year mark. So yeah, I caught on that. I wanted to get that exact date because it said he had only been in office for a year and said 2016. It threw me off. So hiring from the outside. I get why it happened. Yeah, I totally understand what the president's take might be, that you just don't know who in leadership to trust at that point. You have just some bad directors that came through, and I'm sorry to put it that way, but you had some bad directors that came through, people that did not or were not capable of doing the job. I have no doubt that they wanted to be great in that job, but they just weren't good at their jobs. And we had a lot of directors, it was like keep their name on a dry erase board for a while there, right? Marshall did not arrive quietly. From the outset, he signaled a hands-on, highly visible approach. In less than a year, he and Smith have visited more than 60 facilities across the country, engaging directly with staff and inmates. And you want to know something? If I was a BOP officer, I'd appreciate that. Whether they were coming to mine or not, when I was with the Bureau, it was rare to see a director, deputy director, or even honestly, a regional director visit visit a federal prison. And most of the time, if they did, they only went to the warden's office and left. But seeing directors out there, like going to that really combined, I think they had like a combined church service. There were staff and inmates there, which cool, right? If that works for you. But to see them actually getting out onto the yard, wow, just hats off. I mean, you can criticize every director. Every director is going to get criticized, but the fact that they're getting out there, that's awesome. Love it. All right. His quote: "My best days are being at those facilities, walking those hallways." Marshall told me, "I want to hear what both and inmates have to say. I want to understand." I have no doubt that that is true. Listen, folks, I don't think that that is garbage can speak. I think that is 100% true. I want you to think about this, okay? He's getting paid to do a job, okay? On any given day, he could be at central office in Washington getting berated by senators and lobbyists and everybody with their message of the day, you know, or he could be out there with his employees taking compliments, taking complaints, hearing what's going on, seeing the population, and not dealing with government, really, higher ups. I 100% believe that, Director Marshall, 100%. So let's continue. But the challenges Marshall inherited are significant. Congress recently reduced the BOP's annual budget below prior levels, which is ridiculous. Congress, there's agencies you can cut, but you can't cut the BOP. I'm going to be real. Like, I could sit here all day long and talk about agencies you can cut because they don't have a population that they have to take care of. Okay. The BOP does. You need to throw money at them. I'm not going to get into too much politics today. Moving on. The BOP's annual budget below prior levels, forcing leadership to rethink priorities in real time. At the same time, expectations from oversight agencies, lawmakers, and the public remain high. Against that backdrop, Marshall is attempting something difficult: reshape the Bureau's culture while managing fewer resources than in years past. And really, if I would want all the BOP staff outside of the regional and central office to look at them, understand, yes, BOP Director Marshall is your boss, yes, but his job is not to supervise you. I mean, I think probably Director Marshall understands his job too. His job is to get more funding from Congress. Like that's it at the end of the day. Okay. Yes, we want all the staff to go home safely. Yes, we don't want an inmate to die or be severely injured. Okay. But his job is to get the Bureau more money. Okay. So really, you fall to the deputy directors that are the more hands-on one, and Josh Smith has, oh my gosh, been the most hands-on deputy director ever in the Bureau of Prisons. I'll say that publicly, hands-on. There is no argument. There's no other argument for anyone else. Josh Smith has been the most hands-on deputy director I think the Bureau has ever seen. I've seen other directors be, go and make their rounds per se and go see the people here and there. So that's not new for a director, but a deputy director getting that involved, that's awesome. Good for him. I hope I meet you, Josh. I really do. Rebuilding trust by focusing on staff. Marshall's strategy begins with a simple premise. If the staff is not supported, trained, and properly developed, nothing else works. What was I'm going into this live. I haven't read this article. What was I just talking about? The best times that I ever had at the Bureau of Prisons were when that IF or ICT class was full of 20 or 30 people all the time, just constant. Just hire them, train them, get them out there. Hire them, train them, get them out there. Hire them, train them, get them out there. Okay? Listen, I'm going to say this right now because I know there's some Bureau, there's every level of Bureau that watches these sometimes. Okay? Your paycheck is your thank you. That's what you got for doing your job. Okay. So, so I get when they keep mandating you and mandating or having to work extra days, that sucks. I get it. But if you're not getting mandated anymore, okay, if you can work 5 days a week and go home and be with your family and not have to worry, you could plan dinner after work. Okay, that's a good bureau. Okay, it's a start of a good bureau. Okay, I've been part of a great bureau, but it's the start of a good bureau right there. Okay, one of the first issues he identified was the breakdown in training and preparedness across the system. DEI, that's what it did. I'm sorry, it's the truth. DEI broke down training across all federal agencies because all of a sudden hiring the best staff for a job didn't become the priority. It became priority of making sure we were hitting certain marks with our hiring. And yeah, I mean, look at NTSB and the FAA right now. So the NTSB really just has so much slower hiring movement that DEI didn't really affect them, but it did affect air traffic control and the FAA. And the FAA is just, I'm with Captain Steve. I agree with him that that federal agency, I'm sorry, but there should be some mandates that the FAA at least has to consider NTSB recommendations, but the fact that they can just ignore them, okay, I'm back. I'm back. I'll let Captain Steve talk about that. That's not what my channel's about. All right. We haven't trained in over 2 years. We have people that just aren't prepared to do their job. Oh my gosh, so true. And I'm willing to bet that the training quality of DCT and SORT has also suffered. I'm not going to say it's bad, but it's probably suffered in the capability because of less money and less qualified staff, right? Because you have to remember, like, as you end up if nobody else is taking a job, you just have to there's a population there. You can't leave positions unfilled. You just have to take who you can get sometimes. And sometimes those aren't people that are good at their job. I think we went through a few directors hiring like that. His response has been to reinvest in training while also reshaping leadership. Uh, Wardens and regional directors have been replaced, expectations reset, and accountability emphasized. I would recommend to the existing training staff that I would reach out to a retired instructor. He's been retired for years. I hope he's still alive. He's one of the best instructors I ever got sat down with was Mike Golden. Most of the people that were in the self-defense training, I was a self-defense instructor, uh, know Mike Golden. I think he would have a lot of great things to input. If I was at the bureau right now, if I was in a position of leadership at the bureau, I'd bring that guy as a contractor, as an advisor, and just put some of his ideas to work. I think he could really help with that. Remember, Mike Golden, good guy. The most important shift is philosophical. We're not going to be measured by how many people we have incarcerated, Marshall said. We're going to be measured by how many people we release back into society that never come back. And listen, folks, if you want to be a bureau person, if you are a BOP person at any level, you got to sell out to that mission right now. I get it. I have no problem saying that I used to be a government hack. That was my job. My job was to keep them housed because that was the mission at the time. The mission now is reentry. Okay. And that's the mission of every correctional agency now. Okay. And I get it. I worked a pen a lot of times, so reentry might not be for 20 or 30 years for them. I mean, you're going to have inmates there that are there for the entirety of your career too. Funny. And you know what, something? If you're one of those guys that maybe a homesteader that worked a joint where you had that one inmate that was there from your day one, that was also there on your last day, that's a story I want to hear. That's a story I want to hear. If you know one, if you know any of that. So I'd love to hear that. Get in the comments. I'm easy to get a hold of. Santino Pino's the easiest guy to find on the planet. Can't find where I am, but you can't find how to contact me. Okay. A budget reality that changes everything. While leadership changes are underway, the financial picture presents a major obstacle. The BOP increased its funding to address infrastructure, staffing, and longstanding deficiencies. Instead, Congress approved a lower budget than previous years, forcing leadership into difficult decisions. And this is what Congress getting involved in the BOP is ridiculous. Okay. There are certain agencies that just have set funding that is not up for debate. And I think because, not for any other reason, but you have a population that is constantly growing because crime is still in style. Okay. You have a population that's constantly growing. It needs more funding every year by a percentage. Okay. The Bureau of Prisons as itself grows between 5 or 10% every year, which means about it's going to need at least 5% more budget every year. And if not, you're putting lives at risk. You're putting officers' lives at risk. You're putting inmates' lives at risk, and you're putting the public at risk. Okay. Like, I, again, I could list a whole bunch of agencies that don't need that money. Okay. BOP does. Okay. IRS doesn't need it because that's a job that, even though, yeah, you want to fully staff the IRS, yes, and it could delay a tax return for somebody or something like that by what, days, right? It's not going to be weeks. It's not even going to be, may not even be days. It could be hours, right? But no matter what, at the IRS, that stuff's going to get done. You can get to it. Okay. You don't need to have someone that's going to do everything right now. But the BOP, it has that right now because it has an inmate population. There are people there. Think about this. What if your school district stopped hiring teachers? Well, there's always kids. That sounds crazy. Yes, it's the same thing. You're always going to need corrections officers because crime is still in style, unfortunately. Okay. We were very, very excited. We thought finally we're going to be able to address some of those big needs. Marshall said, and then we get the final bill, and it's 8.1 billion, significantly less than the 8.7, which again, I mean, 600. That's a huge hit. Okay, I get it, but it wasn't a billion. Okay, we believe was in the big. We believe was in the big beautiful bill. This creates a structural dilemma. The Bureau did receive one-time funding of 5 billion, allocating 3 billion for staffing and training, and 2 billion for critical infrastructure improvements. Marshall saved. Marshall said some of the money. We will use all of that, but we cannot rely on it for ongoing operations. Leadership must now decide whether to stabilize current gaps or invest in long-term change. Marshall is clearly focused on the latter, even on the short-term pressure amounts. And listen, when it comes to funding, I have said it in almost every video that I've talked about in the BOP, okay, is that you need to allow BOP staff to get their stories out there in their own way. Have an agreement, make them sign something. You can't disparage the BOP or whatever. I get there's an agreement. You can't be working somewhere and disparaging it. I would very adamantly say no talk about pay. Everybody wants more money. It's not always going to be there. I get that. But talking about positive stories in the Bureau of Prisons, you need to let people get out there. That's going to be your best recruiting tool. It's social media. It's the social media era, and you don't let any of your staff talk about their stories on there. Okay, at all. And the only BOP content that's out there, I think, honestly, is the BOP channel in mine. Right. Everything else is kind of general corrections, but I focus kind of solely on the Bureau of Prisons. So I get it. Like I'm sending that to the administration. Let them, let them come on here. Let them do an interview. I'll keep it positive. I have no problem having a conversation about what we would talk about and all that stuff. I want the Bureau to thrive. I want it to grow. I want it to be safe for inmates. I want it to be safe for staff. I want it to be safe for the public. I want it to be a great career that people are looking forward to. I want it to be a great retirement story that people can enjoy. I want it to be something that people can talk about in the public and not be afraid of the BOP sending them a take this off the internet, right? I want it to be great for everyone. I really do. Do I ever think that we should have YouTube channels for inmates? No, never. That's an impossibility. No, thank you. They don't need that. They've lost their right to that. Okay, they can get it back when they get released. But staff, you need to let them get their story out there. The ones that want to. There's plenty that do. I kept myself very safe. I kept myself very incognito that I could still have a little bit of a public view that was not in any way, shape, or form related to the Bureau of Prisons. It can be done and very easily. And it's just shocking to me that it has not been allowed. Okay. That's my 15 cents right there. Working with oversight, not against it. One of the most notable shifts under the Bureau of Prisons' posture towards oversight agencies. Rather than resisting scrutiny, that as many past directors have done, he's embracing it, engaging with the GAO and the Office of Inspector General. And you know what? They must be talking about the directors after I left, like the post 2016 directors, because or the past 2013, because I saw all of them very engaging with oversight. We didn't really have anything to do with GAO, but I get that is the new. That's kind of like engagement with GAO prevents Doge, which isn't a thing anymore, but prevents Doge from coming in and finding flaws, right? So I get the new need for that. OIG, Office of Inspector General, that was always a big part of the bureau. If any directors stopped having uh, stopped having a relationship with them, that they need to take ownership of that mistake. Like, because I saw my directors always had at least, and my administration always seemed to have a good working relationship with the OIG. I mean, we rolled over and waited for our tummies to be patted anytime that like PREA showed up, right? So who knows? PREA is an acronym for another oversight committee. This is more than optics. It reflects belief that transparency and collaboration are necessary to rebuild credibility, hiring good staff. For an agency long criticized for being insular, that shift may be one of the most important developments of all. Fixing the First Step Act, expanding rehab. Okay, so it's a long article. Let me just hit some bullet points. I'm going to do the quick read, the first one or two sentences from each one, just finish this video off. First Step Act was designed to transform federal corrections, but implementation challenges slowed progress. Marshall moved quickly to create structure and accountability, including establishing a dedicated unit focused entirely on the program by assigning longtime BOP executive Rick Stover to look over at the First Step Act implementation. Marshall focused on bringing problems with implementation to a single task force. Well, that's good. That's called compartmentalization. I mean, he did have a good career at a different agency beforehand. So sounds like he's coming in with that. All right, next couple sentences. These tablets will be a game changer. So giving more, is that the tablets for the inmates that I've heard about? Adoption of tablets for inmate programming. So one of the technologies, tablets for inmate programming. You have inmates going into prison now that are used to having a device in their hand all day, right? Like if they're coming off the streets today, they've been used to. See, I didn't live in that bureau. Okay, so most of the inmates that I had to deal with, especially the majority of the population has been there for at least a few years, right? Like the prevalence of mobile devices and the attachment to our hand was so much different. But that is how people learn and engage now. So having tablets, here's the thing, guys, I'm going to say it out loud. Sorry to put it out there. All this stuff is to prevent them from doing bad things. So the more stuff you can give inmates to do, and on top of that, the more electronic stuff that you can give them that you can also monitor, that's a good thing. Okay. They're not going to give them guns. They're not going to give them rope. They're not going to give them escape. They're going to give them candy bars and hobbies and a million ways to communicate with their family because that's what's going to keep their behavior good. Okay. So not all of them, but the majority. Okay. More broadly, Marshall is pushing the BOP to fully implement the First Step Act. For the first time ever, the Bureau is creating a dedicated office to oversee First Step Act. Goal is to have 15 dedicated employees that exclusively work on FSA every day. It's an interesting thing, and I love the nuance here. Is that First Step Act funding? Hey, you passed this act. I need a team of 15 people. I need 15 more positions, which means more funding, and you have to boost up that 8.1 that you gave us to at least 8.2, right? I I get the CEO mentality on that one. Good job, Director Marshall. Sorry if I put it out there, but dang, that's good. That's a good move. Rethinking reentry and home confinement. That's really good. Good time. Reentry always remains. Listen, there was a time that when you found out somebody was in federal prison, you kind of like, if you a person that carried a purse, you move the purse over here, you check, make sure your wallet was there, right? Say we're a BOP inmate. Now, I don't care. I think most reentry programs have done, they're coming out with skill sets, which I think is awesome. Um, one step closer to demolition man every day. Teach everybody how to sew. Marshall is exploring alternatives, including expanded use of home confinement and challenges to statutory authority, placement decisions. Oh man, that's the toughest thing to navigate in the Bureau is because yeah, the Bureau might want to send somebody home, but then you also have state laws and then I don't think we really get into city ordinances, but state laws, does that allow in that state? That's a nightmare. At the core of this effort is a focus on outcomes rather than tradition, focus on the result. It's not necessarily cheaper. Okay, so we're getting into it. Sounds like this interview went for a while. Staff challenges, structural reform. We've talked about it enough. I'm going to skip that part. But staff disciplinary issues. Let's end on this one. It's a long article. I'll put it in the description. Again, Walt, great article. I mean, seriously, Walt. I hope you get in the comments. Great article, man. Seriously. Staff disciplinary issues. The BOP has a troubled history of staff involved in criminal acts, from sexual assaults to introduction of contraband. Every job has its bugs. It's just the bugs kind of stand out in the Bureau because to be a bug, you have to do really bad stuff, right? Some of these have ended in arrest and jail time for BOP employees. Director Marshall has not shied away from identifying and calling out those who have crossed the line. And I don't know if this still exists. One of the things that helped us was having the wall of shame. So when you worked in the Bureau of Prisons, when I was there, uh, they I'm not going to give this away. Okay, they had a way of identifying you coming in, um, and then that way of identifying you, we had a way of displaying after they were fired, and we did have a a fired file, but it was the wall of shame because we had to be on the lookout for those people because they were actively doing bad things in prison. They might try to bank on because not like we send an email out to all staff like, hey, we fired John today. Don't let him back in. That's not good for culture, right? So a lot of times you didn't know who got fired that day. The control officer did. And so there's that wall of shame in there because you had to be a lookout for these people because they might bank on familiarity and try to re-enter, right? Because think about this. If you saw someone Monday through Thursday go through the Sally Port, go to work, and you see them Friday, you don't think much of it, honestly. I'm going to be real. I know no control officer will admit to that out loud, but it's happened, right? So the fact that they're not shying away from talking about people being terminated, good. Okay. According to the GAO, as of February 2025, the BOP has 12,000 employees. 12,000 employee misconduct cases awaiting investigation. Okay, and this is where the journalism. Walt, I just gave you a thumbs up. Okay, I got 3 cases a day, man. Most of them were lies. In fact, let me close off. Let me let me end this story with the best write-up that I ever got in the Bureau of Prisons. Okay. So um God, he's got a funny name, but I'm not gonna say the immense name in here. So I am working an inmate contact post somewhere in the early 2010s. Wait, I've still got the write up that the inmate written out. It's the best write up I ever got, best inmate complaint I ever had. It's the only thing I got framed from my career. Okay, it's because it's hilarious. I was working a position where inmates have a store inside of the prison, and it's called trust fund, and I would. There's a way of processing inmates so they can come in, a way of processing them out. Only certain inmates are allowed to be there, and there was an inmate that was out of place. Now, I'm not the jump on them, break their arm if they're out of place guy. They're nonviolent. It's like, hey, you're out of place. I understand you're trying to get one over. Go back to your house, right? Go back to your house. It means go back to your housing unit. And he he was like, but I really want to go shopping. And that at that point you have to become the direct CO. No, you go right now, or if not, I'm going to call assistance. We're going to bring you to special housing. And the inmate does this, falls over. Now he's okay. It wasn't even a real heart attack. Probably wasn't even a real thing. My inmate orderly, the guy that mops my floors, standing over there. watches the whole thing. All I see him is kind of laughing, walks away, right? A couple days later, I get called in the warden's office. I will never forget the wording in this. Dear Warden, Officer Pino needs to be counseled on the use of his Jedi Knight powers. Today, I watched Officer Pino use his powers to cause an inmate to have a full-blown heart attack. He needs to be counseled into understanding that his powers should be used for good and not evil. That is a real inmate complaint that I got. That was real. That was on paper. I got called into the warden's office on that one. And that would be included if it was today in that. Do you see what I'm talking about, Walt? That's the only complaint I have about this. Otherwise, I still stand by it. Still a great article. I get that you might not understand that nuance, that many of these are false reports, okay, or fake reports. So otherwise, great article. I'll put a link in the description to it. It's Forbes, so it's easy to find. As always, folks, I appreciate you being here. Thank you for watching the video. If you're hearing my voice, if you have any TSP questions, call me. If not, hit like, hit subscribe, stick around for the next video. It'll probably suggest one here in a minute, here, right? And then just make sure you're subscribed and get ready for the next BOP headline. Catch you later.